I'm going to show you guys how to build an awesome financial investment dashboard like this one with Claude in less than half an hour. I'm John Namchi. I'm a senior software engineer at Bloomberg. I'm also the founder of Simvo, and our mission is to bring these technical skills to the wider range of audiences, to people like you, and show you that anybody can build things with the modern day resources and skills available or made available by AI. So follow along. In this video, I'm going to show you how splitting your app into 3 specific steps is going to be the way to optimizing your journey towards building an application like this. It's such a really good app too. Like, you can search up any company that you want. It goes ahead, fetches the data, and gives you this beautiful geometric, artistic style data visualization dashboard to help you understand if you should invest in that company or not. We got the price history of the share price of Tesla, all this info, and then the financials like revenue, profit margins, the cash flows, key ratios, and we even got news here. Look, we got company news, we got market news, and these are real links. We can click the link and it opens the actual article. And this is the beginning. And something like this could be the beginning of your own personal financial system, or, just your way of being able to decide if you want to invest in something. We're also going to see, how did Claude do? Where did it go right? Where did it go wrong? And these are recommendations that we're going to learn to help you optimize your ability to build your own apps in the future. This is not only going to apply to building financial apps, but this applies to building almost any kind of, data facing, data fetching, workflow heavy type of application. So I'm really excited to get started on this. If you are too, just follow along, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right, let's get to it. All right, so when you're trying to build an application like this, the best thing that you can do, especially to leverage AI properly, is to build things step by step. So don't try and build the whole app completely at once like that. It's just gonna ask a lot of the AI, kind of overwork your AI. And also it's gonna lead to errors that are gonna be hard to kind of pinpoint down. And that's how you kind of get a project to like blow up and lose control. So it's gonna be way easier and way more manageable to kind of progress through your milestones. So yeah, we'll see how Claude kind of works to build each of these components one by one. I'm sure we'll run into some problems, but that's kind of what this video is for. All in all, to kind of teach you that, vibe coding and building with AI is great. So the first step is going to be finding an API or a series of APIs, which are going to be our data sources for fetching this financial information. Our main goals are going to be to find the different routes and requests we're going to make to these APIs to confirm that we do get the data that we want. Because once we've confirmed it's working, then it'll be very easy to kind of wrap a backend around all of those routes and coalesce them together. There's a big tip here when we're trying to find an API. If you are more clear on the requirements, the AI is going to do a lot better job. So make sure that you're clear on not only the requirements, but also the objective that you have. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and start up Claude. I've got my new folder. It's an empty folder in Visual Studio Code. This is where I'm going to be building Claude. I don't need cursor or anything like that. This is basically the exact same kind of a setup. And I'm just going to paste the prompts that I've set up here, right? We need to find a financial API as well as the goal. So I'm just pasting both of these. And then now we're going to get Claude to give me something. So what I like what's going on here already is that you could see it's asking for endpoints documentation. So it's basically asking for free tier endpoints that we can test immediately. And that's really good. That means Claude already knows that, our goal is to just try and get something working by testing these endpoints, because once we have that, we'll be able to build a backend very easily. All right, so it's completed a recommendation to use the FMP, so that's Financial Modeling Prep, and FinHub APIs. So FMP has a free tier with no credit card required, and it covers, the financials, share price, ratios, company news, and profiles. And then a secondary API, which is FinHub, is best for company and industry news as well as analyst ratings. So for a single company, Claude is recommending us to basically use both of those APIs just for different things. So now we need to basically get API keys for both FMP and for FinHub. I'll go ahead and try and get them now. My FMP API key is this. and then I need to get a FinHub. All right, and then this is my other API key for FinHub. There we go. I'm just gonna paste it like that. Usually I wouldn't recommend that you paste it to an AI, but there's no big deal here. You know, this is just free tier API keys. Let's see what Claude will do with these keys. It's testing these API keys, but I think one thing that it should have done already is it should have saved these into like a .env file first, because I don't know how it's going to save, you know, the API keys. So that's something I'll keep in mind. Hopefully, if these all work, I'll be able to say, okay, save it into a .env file. So hopefully that's what will happen. So what's basically happening here, right, is the AI is basically testing all the single requests to each of these endpoints to make sure that we can get all of the data from the specific endpoints that we've selected based on the API keys that I've provided. All right, so we got all routes confirmed. It's going to save it to memory and give me the final summary. That's awesome. So we have all routes confirmed working. These routes were all tested successfully against Apple, so we can get company profile, income statement, balance sheets, cash flow, historical share price, key metrics, ratios, all from financial modeling prep. And then FinHub can get us a company specific news as well as buy, hold, sell consensus and general market and industry news. That's great. So the only change from the original plan was the news endpoints for financial modeling prep are paywalled, so we can't use that, but we'll be using FinHub to do those. So no problems there whatsoever. And I think it's done a great job here. So I'm going to take, let's say, one of the API routes that Claude has tested. I'm going to press enter with the API key, and look, I'm getting all of the historical price movements for Apple. So yeah, the API key seems to work. The API requests seems to work. So we are getting the data, which is great. So overall, if we go back to finding an API, the AI did great, I think. You know, given how we gave the directive of what we needed to do and tested the API endpoints with our API keys, it actually worked really well. The only kind of issue maybe was that the AI was using outdated info to begin with. So the routes that it originally thought were working were old routes that are no longer in production, but it was able to easily update to the correct, stable, up-to-date routes without an issue. And then it tested those and then it confirmed it's all working. And so now we have a plan to go forward with all of these routes and set them up in a backend. And I think that's awesome. So overall, I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10, you know, just because of that little mistake there. But really, I think the big thing to learn here was the way that we built our prompt by finding an API and making the API routes testable. That was the key to make sure that we actually got to a point that we need to. And then the only other thing, which doesn't make it a 10 out of 10, is that, okay, it's saved, you know, the API keys into its memory, and, you know, we have all the API routes, but we should really have those API keys saved into what we call a .env file, because that's the file that usually saves all of these API keys and kind of environment variables so that, you know, we can build an application on top of these, you know, kind of data artifacts that we rely on. So what I'm going to say first is, before continuing, save the API keys into a .env file. So I don't think it's going to have an issue doing this, but I think for a, you know, person who may not know to do this or doesn't have the experience, it kind of falls short in taking care of that. You know, now you kind of get into the question of, should an AI, you know, preemptively do this kind of stuff? You know, did we ask or give it enough context for it to know? But it knows that we are going to build an app like this eventually. So, you know, it's created the env file and there it's done it. So very easily done, no problems at all there. But it does bring up the point that the AI could have been more preemptive and, you know, figured that out or told the user to do that. Now we can move on to the next step, which is to build the backend. All right, so for building the backend now, all we really need to do is Build something that can combine those multiple API request calls into a single request that a front end will be able to use, to build like a dashboard view or so on. And the real main goal that we'll have from the server that we build, either a Python fast API server, for example, is that it should expose a single get endpoint where you provide the ticker, and that's it. Behind the scenes, it's going to coalesce all of the requests that we validated in the API and then send back that data. And the only other thing that we're going to tell our AI is, also give me a get URL that I can paste into a browser or a tool like Postman so that I can see the final data that's been assembled. So that's what we're going to do. And, that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm just going to paste these two prompts, and then we're going to see how that works. All these API requests. And then I think the last thing I can say is, or choose the easiest backend server like fast API to set this up. We'll have to see how long this takes to build. I imagine it shouldn't be that bad given that we've tested all of the routes here. All right, so now it's built the Python server. I'm sure it has still lots more to build. Okay, while the AI is working, this is pretty cool. I like this. I like this async IO gather. So you can imagine, right, this is a code for each of the different fetches, right, that are used for each of the API calls, right? Each of the API calls that we saw in that table are now converted to code here. What I really like is that it's basically made all of these requests happen in parallel or concurrently. That's already a really, really massive win in my opinion. Oh, but look at that. I guess FMP blocks concurrent requests from the same key. So I guess we can't do parallel requests, at least on the free tier. That's not something I will fault the AI for though, because, I think that's something I would have done from the start already. So now look at that. It's converted it to a series of FMP calls. It adapted very, very quickly. So I'm very happy with this. I think that's a perfect kind of sequence of logic. So that's a very, very good optimization there. And I think what's good is that because we did a lot of work to get the API routes working, making sure those worked, we allowed the AI to focus solely on the task of converting those into requests. I think another thing I noticed is, it is kind of working with out-of-date information or information that seems like it should know. Like, again, just spent a few minutes just because of the free tier limit being at 5 instead of 10. I think that's something maybe it should know, but, it's kind of a small thing. But either way, everything is looking good. All routes are returning data successfully. All right, let's go ahead and start up this server and make a request. So I did ask for it to give me that URL. I don't know why it didn't. So that's another thing. All right, let's go ahead. The server is running and I can test it in my browser. So if I press enter, awesome, look at that. Now we have all of the assembled data. Right, so that's basically those 10 API requests coalesce into one single request. And then now we are going to have enough data to basically build a front end around this. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to save all this and I'm going to do sample.json and I'm going to save that. So the reason why is this is going to help our front end know that the data looks like this. So the AI will be able to build the front end very quickly. And so yeah, that was it for building the backend. It's working really well. I'm really happy with it. I think it did a great job. I would give it again a 9 out of 10 for that kind of a performance. The only caveats were it was using old data again for knowing how to use the documentation or use those API requests, especially for FMP with the limit issue. But it was able to solve that pretty quickly. Another thing was, I asked Claude to give me a get request example that I could use to test after the server was built, and it didn't really do that. For someone who's like me, that's totally fine because I knew that's what I needed to do after. But for someone who may not know that, once after we've asked the initial question, I felt it was a bit confusing for someone who may not be as technically savvy to know what to do next based on that. But once I tested it, as you can see, it looks really good. and we have our entire kind of data set. And so yeah, I'm super excited now for the final part, which is to build the front end. All right, so now for the front end part, which is arguably the funnest part because we're going to see our app come to life. We now just need to build a layer in front of the browser that allows us to visualize all of that data that we see. Basically, all of this data over here, right? We want to build that into some kind of nice dashboard with visualizations that looks like a cool kind of financial interface. And that's all we're going to need to ask our AI. At this point, we just need to tell it to build the front end now to visualize the data generated from the backend request so that we can make investment decisions easily. And a big thing here is if we give the AI a reference data object of what that data that we want to visualize looks like, it is going to have almost no problem at all to build a front end to reflect that. It's going to be able to probably do it on the first try, and it's probably the easiest way that you can kind of set up your AI for success, as well as save yourself maybe some tokens as well. And another thing you can add on to is the inspiration of the style that you'd like it to show as well. So that's what we're going to do right now. So now I'm going to just tell it build the front end visualize. I'm going to say there is sample.json, which is what the backend request of the request looks like. And then we're going to say the main page at the start should just be an empty page with a input to put the ticker symbol, and then I want the style of the page and dashboard to be, let's say, artsy, geometric, minimalist, and then we'll tell it to use the relevant chart, donut, line, bar, etc. that you feel is relevant for each type of data we see. And then for the articles, make your choice as well. Links to the real articles and just showing the titles work as well. So that looks good. And then I think one last thing we'll say is call the app financial investment dashboard, which shows at the start with the input field. All right. And then now we wait. All right. So after it had a full picture of the data, it verified the server was still running, and it's built the app. So we have a landing page with a subtle grid, geometric brackets, and so on. And then we have the dashboard after we enter a ticker, which is all of that info. Awesome. So let's go ahead and search it up. So I've opened the app here. It looks really nice already. Look at that financial investment dashboard. That looks great. Let's go ahead and try it out. So I'm going to put in Apple as a symbol, press analyze. It's fetching data. Wow, that's awesome. Wow, look at that. That is nice. Oh my goodness. I can't believe it's built this in the first go. And then we have the company news here. Then we have market news. And then if I click on an article, I open an article. Wow, that's insane. Look at my key ratios here. My analyst consensus, it's a strong buy or a hold. My balance sheet, my cash flows, revenue and profit. These are the profit margins over the years. And then this is the share price. Wow, that's just unbelievable. I have to say, I'm absolutely stumped by how amazing of a job it did here. This looks like such a beautiful financial application interface. And all I'm going to say is that was a 10 out of 10 amazing job there at building the front end. And I think the key to this, that it was able to do this in one go, was this sample data that we gave it. Because we said this is what the data is going to look like once we fetch it from our server. Based on that, it built the front end to match exactly what the data was going to be expected. And so because of that, it had basically a perfect reference to work on that. It didn't need to make additional routes. It didn't need to, make more requests to build this understanding and view. We built that view for it. So yeah, that's a perfect 10 out of 10. And just like that, we built a full financial investment application in less than an hour. And I hope you really enjoyed working with me to kind of learn how to build something like this. So if we were to recap things on how we built this amazing app, this 3-step process that you see here is basically your beacon towards building applications, any kind of application, especially with AI. What this does, it allows AI to focus on what it does best, which is build and focus on the nitty-gritty, on the scoped kind of context that you give it. If we asked it to build all of this at once, I mean, it's going to just cost a lot of tokens, a lot of, you're going to get a lot of drift, you're going to get a lot of things and different kind of setups that you're doing for each step, because, you're not basically letting the AI work in this kind of like scoped environment. And I think that's the biggest thing with AIs right now, is they're very, very good at working within scoped environments. Once you kind of increase the uncertainty and the need for making all of these different setups, building a multi-pronged application all in one go, that's when you start asking a bit too much of AIs at the moment. Now, I think something with like multi-agent systems or sub-agents could be something that addresses this. And I think that's something that we're going to try out sometime in the future. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a lot too on how to build effectively with AI, what works with coding with AI right now, what doesn't. But what I can really say is, with a proper system, with all these tips involved, you can be on your way to building your next application within an hour's time tops, even if you're not that technical, as you saw over here. So thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this video, definitely follow along for more, or let me know in the comments what you'd like me to teach you next.